Hi there guys, welcome again to GenVFX. My name is Gary Noden, and yes, as you can probably hear from the sound of my voice, I have a cold. Thankfully, it's just a cold. I have been testing every day, just to be sure, and as far as I know, I have not got COVID. So lateral flows beside, I'm just full of cold. Today we're going to be doing a little tutorial which will teach you how to make this. Yes, it's a title sequence, and the point is that, here's the point for me, I use After Effects to do these sorts of things all the time, and a lot of the stuff that I do in After Effects is kind of doing a 2.5D, which isn't quite 3D, and it's not really 2D, it's a combination of both. So I'll have the camera, and then have planes and things moved around, so we get parallax and distance and and sometimes I'll break things into pieces, and then I'll make them all fly back together by reversing the composite. You do it so they break up, and then you sort of like make it in a pre-comp, and then you reverse that pre-comp so your things sort of come together. And a lot of that stuff is actually done in 3D normally, especially these things that shatter. And I thought to myself, I can do a tutorial that incorporates a few things that I have done, as well as welcome into the world Krita 5.0. And it is, I tell you what, I've been always happy with every single release of Krita, and the last few I have found they've been a bit twitchy in the speed. There's been some glitchiness in the rotation of the image area, where it suddenly decided to just rotate for no reason whatsoever, and it's just 5 came out, and it's like all that stuff that was going wrong, it's gone. It's all gone. It's all just seems to be working really, really well. So I actually have been using Krita 5.0 for some of the work for this, and it's free. It's free, it's a paint package, the brushes are really, really fast, the landscape you're working on it is really, really quick. It's great. It also works in 32 bits, you can actually paint an HDRI map. So there's all these wonderful things, and it has the wraparound thing that Photoshop has, but Photoshop's only just put that in, where it's just been inside of this for ages. It's totally editable workspace. It's a really, 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 really good painting package. So basically what I thought was we could just do a title sequence as I would do it in After Effects, pretty much, but do it in Blender. Because, well, hell, why not? You know, I mean, there's absolutely no reason why you can't do the whole of this inside of Blender. So let's get started. So, as you can see, here we are. We have our splash screen right here in the middle of the Blender workspace. As I say, occasionally I will be editing out some of the sniffing and coughing. The occasional one might slip through, like that one. So you can already see we're in Blender 3.0, that's all good. And you can see I've got title sequence 5 there. We're not going to go into title sequence 5 because that's the finished thing. There's no point in doing that, is it? We need to start from scratch. And as I often do, as you're very aware, I try not to do anything really that you haven't got access to. So basically, this is what you have. This is what you're going to get. This is all from basic Blender, no add-ons, and it's the whole shebang. So what you do need to do, though, is we need to turn on a plugin, an add-on. We need to turn on an add-on called Import Images Planes, because it just makes everyone's life a lot easier. So if we go to Edit Preferences, I've already got it turned on. So if I go to here and I type in image, you can see here, import, export, import images as planes. So mine's already set up, and I'm going to now do exactly that. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to take our lovely camera here, and I'm going to press N, and let's just get on the camera, and I'm going to reset all of this, and then I'm going to rotate this up to here, so that, let's just set it to 90, might as well, 90 in the X, set the Z to 0, and the X to 0, and the Y to 0, and then let's just pull this down the Y-axis, shall we? So it's now looking directly into our scene. So if I go for the front, we're looking down there. If I go to 3, we're looking down there. So I'm now going to start to import some images. So I don't want that big bricky thing, so I'm going to get rid of that. So what we need to do, of course, is to import these images as planes. Now we've controlled and turned on the add-on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to file, I'm going to input, images as planes. And if we go into the project folder that we've got here, which is not that one, it is, this is down the bottom here, of course. And we've got planes. And here we have, we've got a Krita file in here of, well, I think, did I leave it? It's not in there, I've moved it somewhere else. And what we have here is we have mountains, 4 mountains, dotties, which is lots of little dots, ditties, which are lots of little white dots, because of course ditties are always white. Ditties are always white, dotties are always black. No idea what I'm talking about. I've got some clouds, I've got a small tree, I have and branches, I have and BG sky, and I have back mountains as well. Now back mountains essentially and 4 mountains are the ones we're going to use. We're not going to use mountains.png because I've made these from those. But if I was to show you these, if I should change the display mode, no, that's fine. I don't think I can show them any bigger, can I, this way? It'd be nice if I thought I could. I thought I could show them bigger. Size? No. Fair enough, it's just show me the size of how much space they take up. There's also one here which is a church. Now, all of these have been created as one Krita file. Krita files also store like PSDs, so you can actually have them layered. And I'm not sure the plugin works, but you could load them up into a previous version with a plugin. I think it was for 2.8 something or other that allowed you to open Krita files inside of Blender. Blender, if you are listening, please can you make sure that this function of opening a Krita file inside of Blender is just standard. It would make life so much easier. Why is it any different to a PNG? I don't know. Anyway, basically, so I have these now as PNGs, and I'm going to select all of them apart from mountains. Let's get rid of that one there. And I'm going to import planes, and I'm not going to offset the planes. I'm going to set them, the offsets down to 0, and we want them in the positive Y, do we not? So let's go import images as planes. There you go. And it's staggered them, which is interesting. I didn't realize it did that. It's done the offsets, hasn't it? It has done offsets. That's really, really clever. Didn't want it to do that. Didn't know you could do that. I'm going to pick all of these, and I'm going to select those. I'm going to go Alt 0 on all of those and go Enter. I should have done that. Oh, well, let's do it this way. If I select all of these, and I press Alt, and I click in there, and then I press 0, I'm going to return. It sets everything back. Anything that's in here, be it a modifier, be it a transform, if you press Alt and make the change, it does it to every item you have selected. Remember that. So basically at the moment what we've got here is now got all our images all stacked. I'm going to change this to the modeling view. And I'm very quickly just going to bring in, and I'm going to put in here the camera view. So let's press 0 so we've got the camera. So now you can see there is our camera looking down here. I'm going to change the lens from a 50mm to, oh, should we keep it that wide? Actually, do you know what? I think we will. We'll keep it that wide. It's quite a nice. We don't want it tight, really. I mean, we could go for a much smaller number. So if we're bringing this down, we probably get much more extreme parallaxes and stuff. But let's leave it at 50 because I quite like 50mm lenses. And at the moment, when I look at this, I bring this in here. You can see that they're all now fitting exactly because they were created to be 16:9, and this is obviously 1920 by 1080 scene. Camera looks at them, they're all in exactly the same place, and we can see here they are. There's background sky, branches, our camera, and I'm going to basically create a new collection, and I'm going to call this scene planes. And let's get all of scene plus planes. That's really weird. See, let's put a space in the scene planes, and let's put the small tree in there, and let's put the 4 mountains and the dotties. And let's just go ditties, clouds, church, branches, background sky, back mountains. Let's get all of those and drop them in there. So that separates us from our collection, which let's call scene goodies, just because it's the kind of things we need. And I'm also going to add another one here. I'm going to call this one lights. And let's take the light, let's shove that in the lights folder and stick that in the, well, just stick it here, outside of the way. It just means if I need to, I can very quickly turn things on and off. I want to get rid of all of those, they're all gone. That's all. That's the reason I'm really using the collections as I am. I could use them for more ways. I'm still tempted to, and at some point I'm going to show you what you can do with all the scene stuff as well. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the view on these. I'm going to change this very quickly to rendered mode. So I'm going to press Z and then 8. And that changes over to rendered mode. And now there you can see all the little layers have just appeared. So every single one of these they've got basically they have a built-in shader. When it brings them in as an image, it creates the shader, makes sure the image has a UV coordinate space, and drops it directly into the scene. Now, of course, each of these layers that we created, even though they're alpha-based PNGs, they are all on top of each other at this particular point, but they keep their size. They don't say, oh, I'm going to crop it down because there's nothing else apart from there. It looks at it as the image, not as the alpha space, which is really, really imperative to us right now. So if I just set this one to wireframe, I want to start spacing these out so that I've got something here that I can see as a scene. I've got my camera. I'm looking down here. This is my camera view. Let's do Z8 in there as well. Now you can see a bit more. And let's take this light here. I'm going to change the nature of this light from a point light to a sunlight and set it to 1. And I'm going to just for the purposes of this, I'm just going to come up here. Let's just go to the top view by pressing 7 and rotate this around so we can see all of the stuff that's here. Now, at the moment, it's all on top of each other. You can't tell what is what because it's all over the shop. But what we want to do here is we want to get that sense of parallax. We want that sense of distance. So what we're going to do is going to take the thing that's the very, very furthest thing away, the background sky, and I'm going to pull this. I'm going to pull it all the way over to there. Now, how far is that away? So that's 22 meters. So let's make that 30 meters just to be absolutely sure. But you can see now the scales are wrong. It's too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor over here, not too close to it, but over here. And I'm going to press S and I'm just going to pull. Stop, S and pull. Stop, S and pull. Until that's just outside of the constraints of my camera view. Now, the reason for doing that, of course, is because if I don't do that, I get no parallax. Everything looks wrong and tiny and just totally wrong. So I'm looking at this as if I'm doing the last frame of my animation. So where this camera currently exists, let's say that its placement in this world, which is at, no, I'll leave it exactly as it is. I'm going to leave it exactly as minus 2.4685 meters away from our origin, and that's 30 meters away. And of course, if that's where the background skies are, back mountains also need to be somewhere similarly placed to that. So let's move this all the way over here, and you can see it's forming a little shadow, of course, but it's not accurate. There's another reason for that. We'll come back to that in a second. In fact, I'll do it very quickly. Let me just scale this one up now. You can see it's taking the whole object as the transparency because we are, of course, in we're outside of what would be considered our workbench. We're in Eevee render mode. So I'm going to bring this forward a little bit so it's not quite directly on top of our sky. And now I can see it's too big here to match up correctly because I drew it all correctly. So I'm making that a little bit smaller. Let's now go to the foreground mountains. So where are they? And we'll bring these over here, and then we'll say, right, okay, I need to scale these up as well. So scale these up so they fit the environment correctly. That's good. And they're a fair distance away from that, which is nice. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to take the church first of all. Now I'm going to move that. I think that's probably not bad. And that's probably not a bad placement for it, to be honest with you. And let's scale this up. So up it goes. Let's just make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And now I'm going to take my clouds, which I completely forgot about, and move these all the way back. So they're roughly in front of the, there we go, covering our background sky. Let's scale these up. There we go, that. And again, you still see this sort of like, we're getting all the inaccurate shadows, and I will get rid of that, as I said. So I've got my ditties, which are little dots, which I'm going to put over here. I've got my dotties, which are little dots, which I'm going to put over here. And I'm going to scale these up. Again, looking down the camera, really. And let's throw the ditties, and let's scale those up a bit more. There we go. And I'm going to have my small tree, which I will bring over to about here. And I'm going to scale this up like this. And that's not where I want that to be. But I did draw it in the middle for a very good reason. It just makes it a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this down. And let's just move in here. In fact, let's do it this way so we can see better. Let's move this one in this way a little bit. And bring this down so it feels like a small tree. And let's scale it down a little bit more, I think. There we go. So that's just about there. And I'm going to duplicate. Let's go Shift D. There we go. And we're going to move this one over here like this. I'm going to move this behind the church a little bit and bring this down just so it's a little bit of something different there. And so if we start going from the back here, let's have a little look at what we haven't messed around with yet. So we've got the background mountains, background sky, these branches. Now I want to bring these branches a little bit further forwards and then scale those up. I don't want those too far forwards because they're kind of like the last thing that we want to see when we pull back, because that's framing what we've done. But obviously here things are looking a little bit pony. I'm just going to make this sun strength a bit brighter. We're not seeing, we're seeing a hell of a lot of shadow and not a lot of detail, because they are just the color of the texture of the material. We're only seeing the paint strokes you can see here that are in here, which are in the color. That's nothing else. That I painted the whole thing black and white on purpose, by the way. And now you can also see, if I just show you this, you can see my little dotties and my little ditties. Just see my little ditties in there as well. But so what we need to do now is we need to think of this in terms of what we're going to be doing with it, because at the moment it's just one single light and it's not really lighting it up very, very well, because it's just, as I say, these grey texture maps. So we need to add some level of form of shade to these shaders, but before we do that, let's just decide exactly what we're doing with our camera. So let's go into the animation node here, Z8 in that window and Z8 in that window. So Z basically brings up the pie menu for what you want it to be. And first things first, I want to stop this awful wrong inaccurate shadowing, because we are going to render this whole thing with Eevee. We are not touching cycles, not that we can't. Cycles does look better with this one, I'll be honest with you, but we want to just do this all with Eevee. So let's come back here to this object and we click on its shader. And if we go down to the bottom here, we have in the settings, we have the blend mode as alpha blend and the shadow mode is opaque. Well, that means that the alpha blend is fine for the blend mode, but the shadow mode is saying, well, I'm looking at what the geometry is, not what the texture is. So if we change that from opaque to alpha clip, what that does is it says, I'm going to make sure it's now using the alpha, but it's a bit harsh. So if you change that to alpha hashed, you get a little bit more detail. You can actually, I think, yeah, you can see there, it isn't there at the moment. There's meant to be a shadow there, it's not. Alpha hashed, and we start to get some textural kind of shadow. It's not incredible, but it's not too bad. I'm going to leave it on show back face. So what I'm going to do very, very quickly is I'm going to do the same now on this one. Change that to alpha hashed, and then you can see we're now getting the shadow correct. Take this one, again, we're going to alpha hashed, and then the same for this little tree, alpha hashed, and the church, alpha hashed, and this one, and go alpha hashed, and then this one, alpha hashed, and then all the way over here our little branchy trees and go alpha hashed. So now all of our shadows are working correctly. That's fine. That's exactly what we wanted. Now I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this at 10 seconds. Actually, no. Let's make it a little bit longer. I think let's make it 300. Just for argument's sake. I just want to do something which has a little bit of a pace to it, gentle pace. So I'm going to start here with frame 1 and frame 2. 300. I'm going to go to about frame 275. Okay, and we're on the camera. It's in our Scene Goodies camera. There it is. And I am going to go IL. So put a keyframe on that frame 275 of that camera's position, because that is the end point. That's where everything looks right. And I'm going to bring this over here to the frame 1, and I'm going to I'm going to pick on that one, and I'm going to move this forwards. It goes right through the window, right through the central point of the window. And there's our little white ditties. You can see them now as if we're like coming through snow. And we're coming to the mountain. Now, I want to be able to come through this church window from the mountain. But now I see that my mountains are a little bit close. I want that to be happening a little bit later, so I'm going to put the camera about there and go IL again. And then if I press play, you'll see it comes back from that mountain, over these mountains, back through our church and our trees, and then resolves to those little branches there. Okay, well that's lovely. That's all very well and good. And that's kind of what I want, but I don't want my mountains to be so close at the beginning. So we will, while the camera is still there, we'll take our background and we'll move it back. And we'll take our clouds, sorry, I'll move those back. Let's take all of our mountains and clouds and stuff. Let's just select those. And you. Move them all back to where they look about right, which is probably round about there. Now let's go back to our later frame and let's scale them up so they all fit together. So when we come back here, it feels like they're a little bit closer still, but that's not too bad. I'm just gonna take this one and I'm gonna bring it a little bit further back, just a little. And so I might have to scale up. No, I should have scaled this. No, I might have to scale up a little bit more. So let's go here and let's go scale. Yeah, you can see scaling up. There we go. And I might just bring them down a tad. There we go. So how does it look at the beginning? Yeah, that's nice. So now it's kind of like, ooh, our mountains and dizzy dot things and through the church window, and then we resolve and end about here. So that, I'm going to say, let's just call that, let's just save this as, and let's call it titles 001.blend. So that's saved. I've got that now. I haven't got to worry about anything else. What I'm going to start doing now is we're going to start messing around with the shading. Now I'm going to start by adding some lighting. The moment you add proper lighting, you need some form for it to light. Now these are obviously flat planes. So how do we give a flat plane some form? Well, they've been painted. And if you look, they've been painted with quite, if I let's go to shading, they've been done with a kind of quite a distinct brush effect. So if I am indeed on, let's just turn down goodies, and if I click on background sky over here, obviously there's nothing in there because the background sky image, if I just show it here, how do I view them? How do you view? Here we go, background sky. So you can see there's all this kind of textural stuff going on there, which is nice. And I want it to feel a little bit more bluish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add into this converter a color ramp. I'm going to drop it into the color like this. And straight away, it just takes a little while, of course, because this thing's got to do its all a little bit of catch up. And what we've got here is RGB linear values, starting with black, which let's just change that to something, and you'll see that immediately the black area turns to like a blue, which is quite nice. And the white area, we could do that being a very little. No, it's not too, nothing saturated, just something like that. Just let's pick something a little bit. Oh no! Now that's better. Yeah, let's reduce the saturation a bit. Set the value to 5. No, we're going to leave the value at 1 because otherwise we're getting into emission territory. So let's not mess around with that. So I've now put a little bit of a blue on that, but it still feels. If I just zoom in here, you see I'm not in camera control mode. I'm just in useless mode. If we go into here and have a look at this sky now, you can see it's just a little bit of blue and white. That's nice. Bit bland. Good. I'm good at bland. So let's increase the saturation. And let's adjust that hue a little bit more. There we go. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some of the height that we're getting from this to actually add some bump. So using exactly the same texture without adding a thing, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go texture, I'm going to bump, I'm going to do this. Let's stick the strength, the color into the height, but we really want it to be, we don't want it to be color data, we want it to be sort of like, what's it called? Non-color data. So, so where you've got here, you've got this sRGB. We need that, but non-color is ideal for when you do anything else. But we need this, so it's going to be sRGB. Otherwise, it's not going to work in the color. So what we're going to do to change that is I'm going to add convert RGB to BW, which basically is make color gray. So now we've got gray values going into that. I'm going to put that normal into there, and hey presto, diggity diggity daddy doo doo doo, you've got bump coming out of that going into the background. So it now has some form, which actually is not looking anywhere near as bad as it could. There's only one light in there right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about this in terms of it being almost like a proscenium arch stage. So let's move this over here, and let's say, right, what would be the nice thing to do right now? Maybe would be to have some sort of light come up from the bottom. So I'm going to, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn scene lights and scene world, so I don't actually have to suffer the reflections, because we're not having a reflection environment for this. It doesn't have at any point. And I'm going to turn the environment world colors down low. So there we go. So it's almost like a stage, which essentially is what we're kind of generating. So let's add let's click on the lights thing there and just go add light, and we're going to add an area light like this. There you see it goes down into there. And in fact, let's just, that's a little dark, just so I can see what I'm doing. Let's take this, bring this over here, and I'm going to press T so we get all those controls. I'm going to move this light over here, and that's probably roughly in the middle of the background. There we go, lovely. So let's do that. Let's go RX 180 to point it directly upwards, and let's change the actual light itself from a square to a rectangle. Let's bring it down. Let's make it 9. Ah, there we go. That's a stupid amount of watts, and there we get something. So obviously it's got something to do with the actual size of this thing. I'm going to take this and make that thinner. Bring this in a bit. Let's bring it down. And let's push it this way a bit. And I'm going to change. You can really see the bump on that side. You can see on that side as well. Not quite so obviously, but it is there. And I'm going to change the color of this to something a little bit more evil. So it's a bit red. And there you go, we can kind of see the red picking up on the bump map, which that I'm much more fond of. I'm just toggling back and forwards between animation and shading. So that's that kind of, oh, that's nice. I'm happy with that. I am just going to tone it down a little bit. I'm just going to change the hue a little bit to something a little bit more. That's not quite boiling red. That's good. And that's also, that's lighting up just that one, hopefully. Let's just move that to there. Bring that in a little bit. Okay, that's good. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate. Let's go to this side, press 3 so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to press Shift D. I'm going to move that one over here. So we're speeding up this section because what I'm essentially doing to the mountains is exactly the same as it is in the background. And I'm literally copying and pasting shaders. But what I did do in these, which is obviously when you're close to the textures of anything with pixels that have been created in artwork, sometimes you can see those pixels. So what we're doing is we're adding some textural noise into the UV coordinates by taking a Musgrave texture, scaling that very high so you get lots of little bits of detail, adding that multiplied back into over the top of the texture space, so that before the texture coordinates get to those pixels, we're adding a bit of like a little bit of woof deformation. So hopefully that is the bit that I'm skipping over in here, but it is there, so you can look at it slowly if you want to, and you can see these things changing. And now if we play this, you can see we've got a little bit more variety on the hills. The sky's got some more colour in it. It still feels a bit dark, and we're still pulling backwards through our environment now. That's all looking kind of what I wanted it to do. That's great. That's great. We'll worry about the text later. But for now, I'm going to just take what I've done here and do it to a few of these other elements. So I'm going to leave the dots as they are. So yeah, dots left as they are. I can not mess with those. I don't really want to mess with those. But what I've also got is when I'm doing the same stuff, copying the same stuff and putting it into the actual branches at the front, I'm also starting to add in a little bit of difference by adding in a texture which actually is designed there purely to gently warp the texture vertices. So whereas before it was giving a lot of noise, this Musgrave that's in there now instead is actually just doing a little bit of animation just to give them like a slightly perturbing nature. You can actually see it better in the sped up than you can actually if you're doing it in real time. But I hope you get a chance to see this, and I hope you think about doing it as well, because it's a nice way of adding a little bit of distortion into your images. But I'm going to leave that as it is. What I am going to do is I need some light on this mountain here now. So I'm going to go back to my area light over here. So let's get our light, pick our light, and go Shift D and do that, and then press Escape to drop. Go to the side view, and let's move it along so it's here. And I don't want it to be that red. I actually want to start moving towards blue. So I'm going to move that a little bit further towards that blue over here. So I'm actually going to go back to this other light here. Now I'm looking at this, and I'm going to move this one a little bit closer to the blue as well. Let's just take this around here through a little bit of purple. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the angle on this one so it's just a little bit further upright. There we go. And then if I just move this in here, we just want it to be just lighting up this one, really. So it's just on here. So if I pull back, we've got this here. And now, basically, I don't want the church to be all in one piece. I'm going to very quickly save where we are, though. I'm going to save this as titles. Do you know what I do love the way you get a little image in your little blend file. In fact, before I do our next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to very quickly go in and I'm just going to make the clouds move just because I can. So let's go back to our frame 1 and I'm going to go IL on the cloud layer, and let's just move it that way a little bit. IL, save its location, and let's go all the way to the end, and let's go GX, move it over to about there. That's IL to save the location. And also what I want to do is select all of these, because at the moment if we go Control tab, you can see it's a curve. I don't want it to be them easing in and out of their move. So let's go with that and press T and then press linear. There we go. So that's now a linear move across the scene. Lovely. Maybe a little bit too much. Looks a little bit too childish. No, I don't care. Today I'm doing childish. I've got a cold. I'm doing childish. So we're going to have that like childlike. That sounds better, doesn't it? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something funky with the church. What I want to do now is I want to do some dynamic stuff. I'm going to blow this apart into lots and lots of little pieces. And then I'm going to bake the animation and I'm going to reverse it. So what we're going to do is make sure, again, you've got to make sure, I've got it turned on in mine, I've got in my preferences. If I go into my add-ons, I'm going to get rid of where it says image, and I'm going to type in here, frac. And there is cell fracture. Now, you can do this in a bunch of ways. It's really, really nice. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to isolate this again. So let's go back to modeling for the sake of argument, because why not? And I'm going to hit I've got the wrong one. I'm going to hit the isolation button on ditties. So let's go back to object mode and we'll pick church and we'll frame you little bad boy. Show me Mr. Churchy. Yep, that's good. And I'm going to press the / on the number pad. So we're in isolation. So it's just that, no lights, no nothing. In fact, let's just do this. We don't need this. Right. And what I am going to do is I am going to make this break up into little pieces. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to make it so there's less surface to generate. So I'm going to go here and let's go into edit mode and I'm going to go subdivide, and I'm going to go subdivide again, and I'm going to subdivide again, and then again, and wide again. Nah, that'll be fine. So that'll do a pretty good job starting with that. So let's now go into polygon mode, select those and delete those faces. Select those and delete those faces. Select these and delete these faces. So we've now just got mostly the church as it stands. And now I'm going to go here to the knife tool, the vastly improved knife tool. How lovely is that? When they come along and they just make things better. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, this. I just want it to be reasonable. And let's do that and go yes, and then let's go up. Oh, what happened there? Ooh. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm just basically carving out the shape of this object. And let's pop out of that mode now, so we can see our just stuff around. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this with particles. So here's our object in the front view. What we're going to do is we're going to basically add a particle object to this. So let's go ahead and modify it, and we'll add a particle system. In fact, no, let's just do it the proper way. Let's go up to the particle settings and just go plus. There you go. So that has now generated a bunch of particles on our surface. As you can see, they're all over. Unfortunately, though, if I was to put in, let's just put the. I really wish sometimes there was a timeline in every single one of these. I mean, granted, it's not hard work putting one in, so I'm not going to moan. But we need them all on the first frame. We don't want them doing that. We don't want any gravity on them, so they're not. We don't want them to drop. So, first things first, velocity. No, let's just turn that off. I don't want it. I don't want it. And the number we'll have is let's set it to 600. So it's not too many. And the end frame we'll set to 1. Don't worry about the last frame. We're just doing the whole thing on the first frame. Otherwise, it's like whoa, we drop away. There we go. Let's go back to Object, Quick Effects, and we'll go Self Fracture. We'll put on Own Particles, not Childs. We haven't got any childs in there. We've got no childs in there. And we're going to go OK. So now this goes through the motion of building us a load of fractures, and then a load of little more fractures as well. And now we're going to do a bit of weighting. Right. So now here we have a couple of odd shapes in there. And also what we can do now is we can also go back to our particle system. We can just delete it. And we have some big pieces and we have some little pieces, if you can see. So yeah, when it came to this particular point, I started looking at what I'd done, and I realized something which I didn't realize originally, is that when you actually do a fracture on a series of single plane objects, it kind of generates new geometry, which is what you'd expect, but it also tries sometimes to force in polygons. You don't really want those polygons, so a lot of this right here was cleanup, where I was removing everything that wasn't just the single planes that we had originally. I didn't want them to have depth, because when you have objects with transparency, if you try and make them deep, it just looks like two levels of images with a depth between them. So that's what going here, lots and lots of cleanup, and then everything will be okay. So there we go. Managed to get rid of all the bits and bobs, but now obviously there's problems, a few problems with where the origins are. So let's go Object, set origin to geometry, which resets all of those. And you'll also notice that there are a set of teeny tiny gaps, because I didn't set the distance between them to actually be 0. So we have got a tiny gap thing. So we might end up having to do a very, very quick final editing thing, but actually I'm going to try and see if it'll look okay with the gap, just for saving ourselves some time, because we're already working longer than an hour, at least in terms before the edit, but even with a calculation in relation to it. So I'm going to look now here, and this is our texture, this is our object. Well, as you can probably tell, if we go into edit mode, our polygons are not looking as though they're in the right places. Let's have a little look here. So you can see that that's not right. Now, so if I set this to ZA as well, what we need to do is take all of these, select all of those, and we're going to go back down the front view, and we're going to go UV, and we're going to just project it from view. Okay, right there. So now we can see them here, and they're all kind of in the correct place, but obviously they're not quite in the correct place. So let's scale them up. So let's do it gently from a distance. If you have your cursor in the middle and you do a scale, you've got no control. So move your cursor to the side and press scale, because it's relational to where your cursor actually is. And let's move these up, and that's now a little bit too big, I think. So let's now move this down a little touchy tad. And remember, we did actually lose that bottom corner because it was looking excessively messy. And now we can see these are our holes inside of our thing, but that now should look correct in here. So there you go. It doesn't look too bad. I can live with that. So these are our shards. So now what I want to do is I now want to spin them around all over the place. So let's do a little bit of dynamics. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by making none of this stuff selective. So I want to see it, but I don't want to be able to pick it. So what you need to do is turn on the restriction toggle for picking, and then we go, right, I can't pick any of that. So I can see it. Can I pick it? No, but can I pick that bit? Yes, I can, thankfully. So we're going to need to see the timeline for this. And even though we're in the modeling section, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, these are just guides. You can have them to be whatever you want. So I am going to, I've got all these pieces here. And I've got a couple of pieces here which look like they are doing very little. Where are they? Oh, do you know, I can't even see them. Well, do you know what? I'm going to get rid of them. Goodbye. You are history. You see, they make no difference at all. And in fact, what I'm going to do as well very quickly is I'm going to go into our world and I'm going to just make this brighter because it'd be nice to be able to see what we're doing. So if we now go down here and we select all of our cells like this, I want to make every single one of these a rigid body. To do it one at a time takes ages. But if you go object, you go rigid body, and you go add active, it does it to everything that's selected. So there you go, that's added a rigid body to everything. So if I press play now, they all just drop. That's it. You know, they're just going to drop. So let me pick this scene, our actual scene, and I'm going to turn off gravity. So when I press this now, nothing happens when you run the animation. They've all got dynamics on them, but they've got nothing moving them around. So let's give them something to move them around. So I'm going to add into this a couple of force fields. Let's start off by adding turbulence. It's going to be a vortex or turbulence. I'm going to add the turbulence first. Okay. Now immediately you add one, it puts it here at the origin on an empty, essentially. And let's just move it so it's closer to our height. Closer to the height. And I'm going to move this down here. And I'm also just going to make it a little bit wider so we can see everything properly because we're getting a bit lost. And I want to put it into another collection and I'm going to call this forces. Basically, I'm not going to... what you can do is you can use a force collection. But I'm not doing that. I'm just putting them there so I can easily get to them without too much trouble. So if I press play now, again, nothing is happening. Why is that? Because the force itself is so small. You can see it's starting to do it now. Can you see? It's just starting to push it away. So when this pops back to the first frame, bing, there you go, they're all there. So I can now scrub now and you'll see there's a little bit of motion. So if I look at it from here, you can see it's like, ooh, a little bit of fracture. Nice. It is nice, but it's not right. What we are going to do is going to increase that turbulence and make it a little bit more useful. I'm going to change the display from a plane axis to a sphere just because I quite like spheres. And I'm quite a round person myself. And I'm just going to go to the forces and physical properties. And in here we've got the shape of it being a point, which is fine. And the strength set to 1. Let's set that strength to 30. I think that's probably more realistic. And let's press play again. And now you can see them pushing themselves apart a lot more. Well, that's better. That feels more shattery. I like that. Oh, that's good. But let's make it so it's doing it a little bit more. Let's make it 50. And I'm going to do something else as well, because this is kind of fine. Let's just take it back to the beginning. That's fine. This is playing around. It's not doing a huge amount. Excuse me. In terms of turning them around or anything. I would quite like them to turn them around a bit, just do something. Just a little bit different. So I'm going to increase the noise a little bit, and that should help slightly first of all. Give them a little bit more alteration. So in recording this, I ended up having to speed this section up. And the reason why is because the actual process of adding forces, it's like anything. If you change one value, fundamentally your shape that you're trying to generate can change. So I was getting still a lot of flat stuff. I ended at a vortex, which I was going to do to throw things around. I also animated the turbulence up through the shape. And in doing so, I ended up getting still a lot of tweaking, a lot of twiddling. And finally, I had something which started to look as I wanted it, as it had done in my original test. And I was not completely satisfied with it at all. So I ended up basically restarting some sections. Nobody needs to see that. There's no need. But as long as you appreciate that actually when you do anything with a force, it's like with the particle stuff. You change one little value and you can change it really in a way that you weren't expecting. So be patient with yourself, be patient with the dynamics, and eventually you'll get what you want. Okay, so now I've got something I'm pretty much happy with the combination of the turbulence and the vortex, where the objects actually fly out of shot quite nicely. If we're looking down the camera view, you can see they're coming all the way out. So if I just zoom in a little bit here, there we go. So we can start off with it kind of there, and then we're seeing the structure basically blown apart. What we want is the other way around. We want that structure to come back together. So what we need to do is go back to essentially what is our modeling framing, just so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to select all the objects in the church thing. So let's go, we go select objects. So that selects all of the things that go into making our little church, but not our church that we've got hidden away, which is quite nice. It only does the things which aren't actually visible. It's quite useful actually, that. And what we want to do is we want to bake the animation, because at the moment it's going that way, and we want it to go all the way back to there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything here that has a rigid body on it, which is all of those. Object, rigid body, bake to keyframes. All of them with a frame step of 1. Yes, please. So we do that, and now we wait. And that's it. I did not edit out that gap. That was how quickly it takes. And then you can see now we can scrub forwards and backwards and all over the place. And that's great. That's what I wanted. And there's like, whoa, nothing happens here. Why is nothing happening at 300? Well, it doesn't really matter. Because we don't need those last 50 frames. Because we're going to turn this completely around. We're going to literally invert this animation. So I'm going to go Control Tab in here so we can see all the curves. If you look, that's everything. Press that there, you can see, right, all those lovely keyframes. I'm going to select those ones. Let's just delete those. Don't care about those. I'm going to select all of these. The last one, where it ends at about 250. That's fine. It's because our dynamics were set up to finish at 250. I think that's probably what it was. What we want to do is we want to turn all of this around. So what we need to do is find the middle frame. So if it's 250, 250. I'm going to go 125, and I'm going to go key, and I'm going to go mirror. And I'm going to go by times over current frame, and it flips it around. That's it. So now all of those just go, and it finishes at 254, which is fantastic. So let's now go back into our shading view, no, our animation view here, and let's just go Z8. And it looks like we can't see anything. That's because I turned all the lights off. There you go. Turn all the lights back on. Nice and simple. And actually I quite like the fracturing in that. And let's go back to here and let's play this forwards. So I may get rid of the animation on the clouds. It looks a little bit too schooly. So that's all forming nicely into there. And then that's all finished and get to there. That's kind of most of this tutorial, to be honest with you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. No, what we're going to do now is going to very quickly add a title block. And then what the rest, the final bits and bobs, will just be something that I will just do in comp. Now, all the stuff that's there, you know about. I've done it in the other tutorials. If you haven't, please find them. There's ones on compositing, there's ones on cryptomatting, and there's ones on basically doing elements and things that just make your scene look better, like a little bit of lens distortion and some chromatic aberration and a little bit of blur and glare. And, ooh. So you could do all those. But what I want to do is I want to put now on this the title of the object, the title of the scene. All of this is fine. I will actually also have to say I do think I actually want some sort of something on this shader and this on the church scatter. So let's pick one of these, and very quickly before we get further, let us just put this so we can see it. Let's pop that there. zoom into this one, and here we have the shader which is on the church, and look, it's called church, even better. So there was no point in muddying the waters again when it comes to actually talking about shading. Essentially what I've done here is exactly the same as I did in the mountains, but I have added an extra level of normal mapping in there as well. So as long as we also have the indication of the building structure using the white as the lift in the texture mapping, I've also got a little bit of other distortion, again using a Musgrave, just on the surface, just to give it a bit more of a sort of like broken, bricky kind of feel. And it is very much not so much like using bricks. Obviously, there's loads of stuff you can do to do that. But I just wanted to have it so it kind of just felt a bit more structurally kind of like a thing. Anyway, I'll stop talking now and we'll crack on with the tutorial. So there you go. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's definitely better. But as I say, we just now need to very quickly, because this is taking forever. As I'm sure you're probably, I may split it into two. You never know. I'm going to very quickly add in a word at the front, and I already know what I'm going to call it because when I was doing my tests I thought, oh, that sounds good. So I'm going to create some text. Now again, let's just go to the layout, modeling layout, and let's go to object mode, and let's minimize our churchy object. Now let's do the church shutter there and the lights, and I'm going to go into scene player. Let's make a new collection, and we'll call this one Namey Wamey. Namey Wamey. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, namey wimey. And I'm going to add text, and we are going to go into edit mode because that's how you edit text. And I'm going to I'm going to call it dark wood. I like dark wood. I think it's a good name. So let's go into the text modifier here, and let's go to the alignment, horizontal. We make it center. So we've already got that. Top base alignment, we want it to be center again. So it's definitely in the middle. And then what I want to do is I am going to give it some height. So let's open up the geometry. And let's give it a bit of an extrude. There we go. Let's make it a bit thick. And I'm also going to do, I'm going to round the corner as well. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm going to, let's go to, where do we, oh, we don't do that. We don't want to do that. Just increase the resolution a little bit. Increase the resolution there a little bit. And tum-tum. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. Obviously, we can't see it in relation to where it is. Oh, and I'm just putting in letters, numbers on the end. Back to object mode, and let's press that. And you can see it's too big. And it's in the wrong place. But that's okay, because if we go back to shading, so we can see this properly in relation to our stuff. Where is the lettering? Where have you gone? Ah, there we go. I hadn't popped out of that. That was the reason why. So I am going to make this obviously smaller. So let's get S and take this down. And let's rotate it in the X by 90. And there we have what I think is actually quite a nice little name for this thing. And let's bring it down like that. And then we'll very quickly like this. And I'm going to like this. We're going to take this spotlight and Shift D, and I'm going to, let's do that with it, bring it back to the middle, and let's go to the side, and let's go G, and let's move this over here. So it's actually on the text, which I still am having to do. There it is. So tiny. Let's make the cone wider. There we go, that's lighting it up. There we go. And we're going to go to the word, and we are going to make it bigger. In fact, we're going to make it so it's a little bit further back. So we start. So we actually start to see it about there. So I want to see it in the proper right place there. So let's bring this back along here. So we see the title there, and then let's make that bigger. So there. So we've got this coming together, we've got that word coming in, and that's all of our stuff. All nice. It's not the name, sorry, let's change the shading on Darkwood so it actually works a bit better as text. So I'm just going to push this over here. Let's get rid of that. Add a new principal shader, and let's just make it a dark colour. And let's make any subsurface, maybe a little bit, teeny tiny amount, and let's increase this, reduce the roughness, increase the specular, and in fact, let's put some red into the, what is that? Remove the subsurface and click anywhere but on that text. It's not looking great, is it? Something about it is not quite right, and I think it's probably the font. So let's go very quickly. Let's go into the fonts and pick something which is a little bit more gothic. In fact, let's try the one I just picked there. That's better. That looks a bit more dominant. And let's scale it up so it's even more dominant. And let's just RX. Nope. Let's go RX and rotate it up. There we go. And I'm going to go back here into the geometry, and I'm going to extrude. I'm going to make that a little bit less. There we go. And that, I think, is that as far as I'm concerned. Let's just do a quick F12 on that. Let's have a look. And it's having a think. It's having a think, isn't it? Oh, that's not bad for not cycles, is it? It's Eevee. So, you know, everything's pretty much there. You've got the feeling of that and all this stuff going on, and a little bit of movement in what's nuts. And so if I now go back to the animation window, and I'm going to just basically get rid, let's just get rid, I'll move this down, and let's go into our camera and go to the visibility, sorry, the viewport display, and I wanted to, helps me pick the camera, let's go into the, here now, viewport display, that's what I wanted, exactly, so the passepartout to black. So now if we just play this from the start, then we see our mountains pulling away from us, and then we have our building forming in front of us, and then we have a word come in that says Darkwood. I mean, one of the final things you could also do is you could set up a depth field on your camera, and we could set the focal distance to something. Let's say, what is it here? So we'll set this to, I want Darkwood nice and sharp. So there, that's nice and sharp. So as we're coming through all of this stuff, we can say, well, that's what's the point where the word Darkwood is sharp? That's there. Set the F to 1.5. Here you go. There you go. That's nice. So we get that text there, and then let's put a keyframe on that there. Pull this back to about here, and now here, let's make this a little bit bigger. So let's set the focal distance to 5, 8. There we go. And then we'll put a key on that, and then we'll come up here, and basically at the top end here, we'll set the focal distance there to 20, and we'll put a key on that. So now what we have is, oh, that's nicely in focus. That's going slightly out of focus. Why? What's going to be next? Oh, it's our building. Is that our building? Oh my lord, look at it. It's reforming. Oh, what's going on? It's all out of focus. Oh, there it says Darkwood. Ah! And you got a sort of title sequence in just under 2 hours. So there you go. I will keep the file of this, of course. At some point, I'm going to take all of the scenes that I've created and stick them in basically a blister zip on Pokemon Gun Road. So if anybody wants to get them, they can just have them, I suppose. Because there's now about 51 of these things, and I'm just chuffed that it seems to be going so well. I am chuffed that it's going so well. It's really nice to actually be able to do stuff and have people go, "Hey man, I really enjoyed that, man. I really liked it, man. Cheers, man." Or, "Hey dude, that's really good." Or, "That's rubbish. Get it off the internet." You have a bit of everything. Doesn't matter though. I just love a comment. I love a subscription. Please don't hesitate to subscribe. I mean, I won't be upset if you do. And just, if you can, pass on the good word to everyone you know, to all and sundry. And I will, well, that's it really. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.